Hi, welcome back. I'm J.M. Frey, and this is chapter 15 of the Skylark song. The seneschal led her, slowly, in deference to her limp, a surprising consideration that she had no doubt that the Coyote had engineered somehow, up a flight of stairs and down another long hall. Here, too, the doors looked exactly identical to all the others she had seen. Whatever the original purpose of the room he eventually chose, which Robin guessed by the bookshelves and the many little tables and cabinets was likely once a study, it was now clearly a workshop. Oil and gas lamps littered every available table and shelf, and the place practically blazed with light. There was a window open at the back, but the air was not fresh. It stank of airship fuel and grease, the fumes so thick that all the other smells were masked. Scattered along every horizontal surface were tins of oil and grease, wrenches, gears, some hosing, half-coiled copper wire, and an old tool wallet. There was also a massive ebony desk smothered in blueprints that, even from this distance, looked to have been hand-drawn by someone without much knowledge of mechanics. They caught Robin's eye immediately, and she broke away from the seneschal the moment she was in the room to investigate them. She squinted at the papers, trying to read the notes in the margins, but they were written in Klonnish. If there were any important folios, any secrets worth stealing among the folders scattered around them, she would never know. Dragging potentially useless documents with her when she escaped wasn't worth her time, especially without being able to read them. She dismissed them from her internal catalog of things she planned to steal before she went. Instead, she turned her engineer's mind to the jumble of sketchy lines and fanciful engineering documented by the blueprints, and snorted. Dragging a finger along an intake hose that wasn't even remotely how these things worked. Whatever this strange concoction of science and hope was supposed to be, there was no way that anyone would be able to create it. There was no metal strong enough to withstand the sorts of pressures this level of combustion would demand, and even if there was, Robin had no idea how to begin forging it. There were notes in the margins of this design, too, in both Klonnish and Saskwyan, but even with the added text, the little machine was nothing more than a fairy story couched in hard engineering. Dismissing the flight of fancy for what it was, she moved around the desk, climbed up onto a wooden crate stored against the wall, and peered out the window. She was on the third story, but there seemed to be a heavy growth of ivy climbing up the wall outside, and, just like in her bedroom, and the salon with the chessboard, the window was barred. With a sigh, she stepped down off the box. "Come, Skylark," the Coyote said, and Robin turned to find him hovering over the blueprints. She hadn't even heard him come in. Stupid carpets. The seneschal was gone, too, and the door was now closed, probably locked. "Is this what Queen Diramond gave you? These blueprints?" Robin said, limping back over to join him, careful to protect her ankle, which was nevertheless feeling much improved after some rest and a warm bath. "Do you expect me to make that for you? Because I'll be honest, I don't even think it's possible. And if it is, then frankly, I don't want to give the Klonn that kind of power." "You do not have to make it. No," the Coyote assured her. Then he reached below the desk, pulled out a nondescript burlap sack, and placed it on the blueprints. It was heavy, whatever it was, and large, almost the size of Robin's whole torso. "You have to fix it." Robin felt her eyes go wide. "It's real? Omens!" An unbelievable, overpowering curiosity gripped her. "Show me!" The Coyote smirked, but stepped away from the desk, waving graciously to the burlap sack. "Be my guest." Whatever was within was vaguely cylindrical, like an overlarge bullet. She reached out and laid an abused palm over the sack, wanting to savor this discovery. She had never had an opportunity like this. From the feel of it, the thing inside was metal, that much she'd already seen on the blueprints, but what kind she had no idea. It was slightly warm to the touch, even though it was off and separated from her own body heat by at least one layer of fabric. Eerie. When she pulled away the burlap, it took her a moment to form an impression out of the jumble of dials, valves, brass-colored and copper-like metals, wires, and tubes. Eventually, it resolved itself into a sort of small engine. It was formed of twin tubes that tapered to points at one end and had exhaust ports that angled away from the contraption on the other. A glass canister filled with golden airship fuel rested just between the points. She couldn't imagine what sort of aircraft could be borne aloft by such a tiny amount of fuel, or by an engine this small, for that matter. She turned it so she could better see the writing on the side of the casing. The words were in some sort of language she didn't know, Franken, probably, repeated in Klonnish, and then in Saskwyan, and then what she assumed was likely Telenem's tongue. Underneath that was a script that was completely exotic to Robin's eyes. The inventor's cipher, maybe? If Robin had come up with something this incredible, she might have tried to disguise it too. Weaponized independent navigation system, Robin read aloud, returning to the Saskwyan, squinting to make out each small engraved letter. She stared in disbelief at the thing, uncertain if she could quite trust the picture her mind was trying to put together. By all the gods of all the fools, Robin said as realization struck her. Someone's meant to wear this crazy thing? Heavy leather straps were bolted to the exhaust tubes, padded with insulation against the heat. The fuel canister would sit just behind someone's neck, with a hose that led down to the engine. A second hose trailed out the side, attached to what appeared to be a control box with a strap which, she pieced together belatedly, was likely meant to go around somebody's waist. Yes, it really did appear as though this was meant to be strapped to a person's back, and then she balked at the thought. Take off into the sky? No glider, no aeroship, just a person? And the endless stretch of blue? Oh, gods, how glorious! Quickly, Robin turned it back around. The fuel gauge and the exhaust ports were angled such that a person's rear end or feet wouldn't get burned off when the pack was worn. It appeared as though it could be steered on the same principle as the gliders, by leaning one's weight to one side or another. Robin found a catch on the casing and flipped it open, cursing the lack of a headlamp as she examined the interior. She'd never before seen half the ingenious ways this engine was rigged together, but that didn't mean she didn't recognize that it could actually work. She snapped the casing tightly closed and turned her attention to the control box. Carefully, she picked up the pack and set it in the center of the room. Then she stood as far away from it as the wire-filled hose allowed. When she pressed one of the control buttons, a twin set of 3 sword blades popped out of the sides of the device like a switchblade, deadly and sharp. Robin pressed it again, and they retreated. I guess that's what they mean by weaponized, she breathed softly, and carefully pressed more. Some of the buttons didn't seem to do anything. One made the glass bubble of fuel fill with air to adjust the oxygen mixture, and one pressed the air back out of the fuel hose, and one made everything on the pack light up. Another button, the most glorious button, turned the engine on. A pilot light was struck by what it appeared to be, from the faint spark that flashed against the inside wall, a tiny flint and steel system placed inside the pack. The pack shuddered once against the ground. It rose slightly, and the smell of burning carpet assaulted her nose. It hovered in place, neither going higher nor drifting about. Stunned, Robin pressed the next button, and a rumbling roar within the engine warned her what was about to happen. Hastily, she pressed the smaller button again, and the pack stopped making ominous sounds. It returned to simply hovering. Holy rutting omens, that's actually incredible! For a brief second, Robin was struck by that same pit-of-her-stomach gravity that she always had felt standing under a god's temple. She was in awe. The pack seemed to be staring at her, eyeless and important. Omniscient. Meaningful. Robin shook her head, willed the feeling away. It was just a machine. Amazing, incredible, unlike anything she'd ever seen before, yes, but just a machine, all the same. Robin shuffled closer and confirmed that she was smelling regular petrol exhaust. She could easily refill the fuel tanks. In the meantime, the pack had filled the room with warmth and the haze of heavy exhaust. Just as she was about to cut the engine, it spluttered, the roar becoming a wet sort of cough. The pack dropped onto the charred carpet and went silent. Even the little pilot light had gone out. She stared at it for a moment. What good was a rocket pack that didn't stay lit? And therein lies our dilemma, the Coyote said from the corner. His voice reminded her that he was still there, cut through Robin's cocoon of wonder and discovery, sliced straight to the bone, and jolted her rudely back into the real world. Yes, Right. Of course. She was supposed to repair this thing for the Klonn, for the Coyote, because she was supposed to trust him. No other mid-flight managed to repair it, the Coyote said. Couldn't? Robin asked, voice shaking. Or wouldn't? The Coyote grinned, but it was tinged with something other than humor. Some of the former, some of the latter. Though your Woden, I believe he said his name was, he was able to make adjustments enough to make the pack run silently. Robin narrowed her eyes at him. Which I assume then you repeated on your own airship. That's why you're so silent in the air. And the fuel conservation? Sergeant Rez's work. Robin screwed her eyes shut, clinging to the edge of the desk. They lived, she said softly. She reached up and brushed one finger along the Saskwyan writing on the blueprints. Whose handwriting was this, she wondered? Rez's? Woden's? Or some other mid-flight, someone so long dead she'd already forgotten their name. For a time, the Coyote agreed softly. For as long as they cooperated. What say you, Miss Skylark? Will you number yourself among the cleverer group and make the attempt? I'll never be able to replicate it, she blurted, if that's what you want. I don't know how half of it's even functioning. You can't have a platoon of them. I do not want a replica, the Coyote said. Just make that one work. Robin stood up, forcing herself to take a step back, away from the incredible pack. Why? The smile that split the Coyote's face was not pleasant. To end the war. Surely, as the pilot in the robin-nosed glider, you know the power one person can wield. All it takes is a few strategic acts, and everyone flees. All it takes is the right rumor, stemming from the right act, and you have power untold. Think what a pack can offer a soldier. Intimidation on the battlefield, a one-man arrow force, an assassin. He could force a surrender simply by showing up. The word slammed into her like a divine fist. Surrender. Robin actually gasped. And you're going to be that one man? His gray eyes glittered, narrowed and focused on her face as if skimming through her mind and reading her every thought. Yes. Robin shook her head, a sort of deep-seated worry crawling up her throat, a childhood fear long forgotten but suddenly horrifically tangible. Saskwya could lose. She had said she'd wished for it flippantly, just to end the conflict, but now that she held the very real possibility that her people could be conquered by the thing that was in her hands, it was... No! Just... No! Even so, the Coyote added as he took a step forward, crowding her back against the desk. Robin thought he probably meant to seem collusive and trustworthy, but it just made her feel more trapped. He grasped her hands in his, forcing her to relinquish the control box, his eyes searching hers, pleading almost, begging her to hear the words he couldn't or wouldn't say. Not here. Not now. This room, then, was not as observation-free as her bedroom. Here, the performance, the dance, the game would need to be preserved. Imagine the fear, Skylark, on the faces of your soldiers when our king takes to the battlefield with that soldier, with me at his side. Imagine the fear on the face of your king himself. King Autumn wouldn't fall for it, Robin insisted, chin thrust forward, defiant. Some stupid guy with a pack? That's ridiculous. It's incredible, I'll admit, and I've never seen anything like it, but it's just one guy and one machine. The Coyote leaned down and whispered into her ear, What a strange thing to hear from the lips of a Seelie. I thought you would have at least said something about gods and luck or magic. Do your people not call me a hobgob? His breath brushed the exposed part of her throat, and Robin wished suddenly that she'd done up the collar of this stupid dress. Skill is not the same as luck, and the pack is not magic, she insisted, turning her face away, trying to put space between his mouth and her flesh. Then you should have no trouble repairing it, the coyote said, that same husky growl he'd had in the forest in his voice. He ran both his hands up her arms, terribly intimate. They skimmed over her neck, dry and warm, and cupped her face in his palms, forcing her to meet his eyes. I trust that you are clever enough to understand what the seneschal will make me do to you if you do not. Skylark, I could not bear it if he did. Please. Robin couldn't help the convulsive swallow. The way his hooded eyes looked at her, the way his hands held her, tipping her head back so that she was forced to look up at him, to lift her face to him, almost felt like he was about to kiss her. He was warm, even in the pack-heated room, and she was still a bit too relaxed and groggy from her bath. His breath smelled of mint and apples, and his grip was kind, gentle. His thigh, where it brushed against her through her skirts, was strong. For a brief moment, everything he said made sense. In that moment, she wanted to curl into him, let him protect her, let him end the war and set her free to fly whenever she wanted. But only for a very brief moment. She opened her eyes. When had she closed them? And stepped sideways out of his arms. It was awkward. Her skirt got caught in the buckle at the top of his boots, but it didn't change her resolve. I won't do it, she said. Skylark, he warned. His hands flexed at his sides, and she wasn't sure if he was holding back from grabbing her again, or if he was imagining them around her throat, strangling her. Probably both. I have been tasked with ensuring your cooperation. Do not make me do something I would not enjoy. Kill me then, Robin hissed, drawing on reserves of courage she normally saved for stupid aerial maneuvers, tinged it with what she thought was probably despair, or desperate, stupid loyalty. Al had always warned her that she was liable to get killed for the air patrol. Finish me off like the others, because I won't help you in this. Misery crossed his face again, there for a moment and then gone in a flash like lightning, hidden behind a cheap, flimsy-looking grin. He gestured flippantly. That is very brave of you, Skylark, and very foolish. If I kill you, it only means that I will be sent to shoot down another glider. You do understand this, yes? How many of your friends yet remain in the air patrol? How many more would you like to die screaming? Like your mid-flight. It struck Robin, suddenly, that the reason his smile looked like a rictus parody of the expression was because he was scared. He held his jaw tight, his head upright, and faced what he feared, but he couldn't help the terror that crawled just below his expression. Robin could see it as clearly as if he was signaling it with flags, though she doubted their hosts ever got close enough to him to see it for themselves. He didn't want to have to shoot down someone else. He didn't want to have to hurt Robin, to kill her, or anyone else. He leaned close again, and in a breathy whisper added, Repair it. Repair it. And we can use it to escape. Skylark, please. One of his thumbs brushed against the bottom of her ear, tender, affectionate in ways that Robin had only seen other men do to other women, in ways that she had never experienced for herself. It made her shiver, made her skin goose pimple, and her breath come just that tiny bit faster. It felt good. Pay attention, Captain, she scolded herself. The pack. Can you repair the pack? Maybe. Should you? Harder to decide. Robin contemplated her possibilities. The pack would never lift two. But it could lift her. She pushed the coyote aside, made a point of not clocking his expression. His wounded eyes were not going to sway her. She grabbed the tool wallet off the desk and knelt by the pack. It was answer enough for him, she figured. Robin didn't think she actually had the heart to vocalize her defeat. Instead, she turned over the pack and opened the catch on the casing again. Peering intently at the mechanical guts, she pushed aside hoses and cogs, and then sat back, biting down on the urge to laugh. Oh, clever Sealies, she thought. She wouldn't be able to tell for sure, not till there was better light and she could decipher what all the strange archaic components inside the thing did, but it looked as if, instead of repairing the pack, the others had been sabotaging it. It wasn't much, a hose connected wrong here, a cog taken out and reinserted upside down, but it was enough to be obviously incorrect to a flight engineer, yet look completely right to anyone else. The pack would never stay lit, not like this, not with the way the fuel supply was being choked by excess air. Her brethren had kept the Coyote out of the sky. They were heroes. And no one would ever know. Grief warred with pride, forming a burning lump inside her throat. Robin scrubbed at her eyes and took a deep breath. She could do this. She could repair it. She could use it. She could rescue the pack and then rescue herself. Trust me, the Coyote had said. Let us end it. And Robin wanted to. The poor man, he loathed himself and all the things his king made him do so deeply, so intently. But he was also the enemy. And the enemy lied. No. She had a plan, and it felt good to finally have a plan. Can you do it? The Coyote asked again, hovering over her. He laid one hand on her shoulder, careful and respectful, but the pad of his pinky finger brushed across her skin, shy and possessive, all at once. What was he thinking? What did he really want from her? Just to repair the pack? Focus on that, Robin told herself, and then nodded. Yeah, I can do it. And how long do you estimate it will take? About a month. Maybe a bit more, Robin lied. The damage wasn't extensive. The pack was a rusty mess, but to make it functional, no more than a week. There were some disintegrating washers, a few wiring bypasses that clearly had been installed a few decades ago, when engineering was less finessed. The wires were more clunky, convoluted, and frankly prone to sparkage. She would have to update that, bring the components up to spec, replace the naked copper with something insulated, and then, of course, desabotage the fuel supply. It would, however, take a month for her ankle and ribs to be strong enough for her to run, and to use the pack without causing utter agony. If there was as much thrust to this thing as she anticipated, she'd also need time to build up the strength in her shoulders and upper arms to be able to steer the pack. A regimen of push-ups in her luxurious cell would be necessary. A month or more would give her enough time to heal, to regain her strength, and to lure the Coyote into trusting her enough in return to allow her to escape. To convince the seneschal that she had been tamed by the power of the Coyote's charm, to turn their game against them. Robin shut the access hatch and latched it securely. Don't you worry, you strange little thing, she told the pack, running her hands across the ruddy casing. The lamplight gilded the edges, gold sparking off the metal as she turned it over. I'll fix you up. And then, together, you and I, we're going to fly away, she promised. If that twinged her conscience a little, if she felt ever so slightly guilty for abandoning the Coyote to this awful prison, well, that was between her and the gods.
Give up when you're down. Fly as long as you can.